And one of our guest callers in town today to call a race out at the Canberra Racecourse is Ian Craig from 2KY Sydney. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning to you, Paul, and good morning, everybody. Nice to be in Canberra for the big one.
Have you been here before, Ian?
Well, I've been to Canberra on a couple of occasions, Paul, but I've never, ever been to a galloping meeting at Canberra. I've called in to see the facilities at the track on a trip about 18 months ago down the coast and then up through Braidwood, Bungendore. And I'm really looking forward to this afternoon. It's an exciting day.
Yeah, it's a lovely track out there at Canberra. It's a credit to the national capital, and I'm sure it'll be looking a picture today, and looking forward to a big crowd out there as well.
Yes, indeed. Well, Canberra racing, Paul, has just gone ahead and ahead in leaps and bounds, hasn't it? I can remember, going back 15, 20 years, it was absolutely nowhere near the strength that it is today. And I mean, when you look at the trainers that you've got down there, fellas like Johnny Morrissey and Frank Cleary and Keith Dryden and the jockeys that ride regularly around there like Dale Spriggs and Johnny Scores, Matt Carlin, the promising apprentice Greg Farrer, there's tremendous depth in racing in the ACT and surrounds for that matter.
That's for sure, Ian, and of course today will be no exception, with great support from trainers from Sydney and all around the place, bringing horses for this prestigious Qantas Canberra Cup.
Yeah, well, $100,000 the Cup, Paul. It's great prize money, isn't it? And it certainly is a lure, and the club has been well rewarded. Gee, it doesn't seem 12 months ago since Nasser Biddy, trained by Max Lees and ridden by Larry Cassidy, won the prestigious 2,400-metre race. That's
for sure, Ian. It's come around quickly again, but it's always exciting times in Canberra around this time of year, October. Of course, we have the big Floriade Flower Festival, and this year the racing has joined in that spirit of a great month, and this year is no exception. A great field engaged for today's race.
I think it's very exciting too for the new Secretary General Manager of the ACT Race Club, Ray Alexander. Of course, has been well documented, formerly boss of the AJC, but I think this is an exciting time for Ray as well.
That's for sure, Ian, and Ray has certainly put plenty of work, as have all the committee and workers out there at the ACT Racing Club to build up to today, and they've surely been rewarded with a great race.
And of course, there'd be one guy looking forward to this afternoon, particularly with the Canberra Cup as his main mission, your local caller, Tony Campbell.
Yes, Tony's been very excited, especially about the involvement of yourself and the other callers coming from all around Australia to make this a callers' day at the Canberra Racecourse, and let's hope it's a very successful one, and maybe the club will look at doing this on a regular basis.
Well, we fellas don't look for any recognition. I mean, it's a very interesting job, and it really is heartwarming to be invited to a prestigious place like Canberra to call a race, and I'm looking forward to catching up with all the boys from around the radio network this afternoon.
Yeah, Ron Papp said to us in that interview aired not long ago the fact that he's got to remember they run the opposite way here in Canberra.
Many people ask us, why is it they go one way in one state and another way in another state? I think that question has yet to be answered.
That's for sure, Ian. It might have had something to do with some rivalries between the states many, many years ago.
Yeah, it could be, Paul.
OK, Ian, well, your race calling career, of course, you've been calling for a number of years. Where did it all start for you?
Yeah, well, it started back in 1962, would you believe? It's a long while ago, isn't it? At the Richmond Greyhounds. It was a straight track in those days, 320 and 410 yards, 10 greyhounds a race, and 14 races on the program, 4 maidens in the morning, and then a break of an hour for lunch and 10 in the afternoon, and they were fantastic days. They really were. So, geez, a lot of water flowed in that time, from 1962 down to 1995. Yes,
you started with the Greyhounds, then of course you got your break with 2KY.
Yeah, well, actually I started at Richmond Dogs, as I mentioned. Also got a break doing the Gymkhanas, the Sunday afternoon trotting Gymkhanas at Bankstown, and then a few little meetings here and there, and after a couple of years of doing the dogs and the trots and the odd gallop, I thought, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'll send a tape into Radio 2UE. This was at the beginning of 1965, and they wrote back and said, well, there was nothing going, but as luck may have it, later that year in October, to be in actual fact the 1st of October, I received a letter to say that could you come in and see us? There could be something for you if you're still interested. So I hastened into Tuyui, and Des Hoisted, who was calling the gallops for them and the trots, didn't wish to continue calling the trots, so I got my break there, and they put me on the full-time staff at the end of 1965, December 1965. So it's 30 years coming up this December, full-time radio, and I joined KY in 1968 in September. There was more opportunity to cover the live moving object, horse and greyhound, so that's where I ended up.
Terrific. So December 65 was the first one at Tuyui, and then across to 2KY, and you've been there ever since.
Yeah, just over 27 years. Great station to work for, and yeah, there's been a few rocky times over that period. I remember when we first started our Saturday afternoon service in September 1974, 2UE and 2GB, pardon me, were broadcasting races at that time, and they had interstate network links. We didn't, and we had to take our Saturday broadcasts off Channel 10 in Melbourne, Clem Dimsey. Our Brisbane broadcast we used to have to take off Keith Nowd, who was doing the public address at the Metropolitan Tracks, and pardon me, it became a very, very expensive service to maintain. And look, getting back to about 1981, I think it was, Paul, we were probably within about 3 months of having to throw it all in because of the costs of particularly mounting an interstate service or services. But 2GB decided to change their format in the middle part of 1981, and they pulled out of racing in September of that year, and 2KY took over the network, and that was it.
Yeah, so you're going back in those days, of course, when you picked up the network, you would have had callers. Bert Bryant was still in Melbourne, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Not 81, no, it was John Russell.
John Russell,
yeah,
that's right.
Bert retired in, I think, 1977.
That's right, yes, of course, yeah.
And
so
then,
it was
of course,
Johnny Russell, yeah.
Well, Johnny Russell, and then, of course, things changed around down there, and 3DB, UZ dropped racing, and 3DB picked it up, so that we then linked with Bill Collins, and it was, yeah, an interesting period.
It sure was, yes, having been in Melbourne in that time, yes, it did do a swap of addresses to 3DB, and then, of course, 3UZ for a while actually dropped racing, but then they came back into it in a big way when the racing industry bought the station, and they're still ploughing along nicely down south of the border.
Yes, well, like you guys and gals in Canberra at 2SSS, there is a market for an all-sports, all-racing radio station in every capital, and that has been fulfilled now, and I think it's working very, very well.
Yes, I think the racing networks are well established now, and of course with the expansion into the country areas by yourselves at 2KY, as well as that down in Victoria, I know 3UZ are expanding. Ron Paps mentioned racing radio in South Australia, Western Australia. It's all up and going, and it's marvellous news. The punters could never be better served, I don't think.
Yeah, well, it's been hard to imagine, hasn't it, until more recent times, that you couldn't get a broadcast of, say, a midweek race, say a Tuesday afternoon at Kembla Grange, if you lived in Orange or Warren or somewhere like that. It's amazing that it's taken so long to come to fruition, but fortunately it's here, and I think it's having a rub-off on TAB turnover, Paul, because the turnover figures are tremendously healthy.
That's for sure, Ian. It's been proved in the past by purely on figures, the fact that if there's no broadcast available, people don't want to bet on the races.
Yep, exactly so.
So it's an important role, and as we said, you're just part of it, part of the 2KY racing team.
Well, it's all changed basically to what it was 15 years ago when we'd have the Sydney races on a Saturday afternoon, Melbourne races, Brisbane races, and occasionally the Newcastle races, but by golly, she's become wall-to-wall racing these days with all the meetings.
It certainly has, and quite a unique day today, I suppose, with just Canberra on. Canberra, of course, have their Greyhound Cup as well today as the Gallops Cup, so just the two meetings in Australia today, and both of them here from the National Capital. Yeah,
it's interesting to see that the ACT, TAB pools and the on-course pools being linked with the New South Wales TAB today, Paul.
Yes, and it's an experiment that was wanting to be tried. Of course, the usual setup is a link with Super Tab, but for reasons, probably financial reasons, they didn't think it was worthwhile opening today, and thankfully the New South Wales tab have agreed to link, which should ensure some great pools for both the Qantas Canberra Cup in the Gallops and also for the Greyhound Club as well.
Yeah, well, I think this afternoon too, Paul, just being basically a one-out galloping operation, the exposure that Canberra is going to get through radio and through television throughout Australia, the in-depth exposure where you're not rushed to have to leave at the end of a race to go to somewhere else, it's going to be fabulous for the industry and the ACT.
That's for sure, and we'd encourage anyone heading to the track today to maybe pop the little radio or the Walkman in the bag, because we will be covering it fully here on Triple S. We look forward to doing live crosses to both tracks, including interviews with trainers, etc. So we're planning a big day here on Triple S. So if you can't get to the track, leave the radio right where it is. But if you are going out, perhaps pop the radio in the bag and keep up to date with all the information.
You can't beat the good old tranny.
That's for sure. It's very portable, isn't it, Ian? It can go wherever you go.
I remember, Paul, just digressing slightly, when television first hit Australia in 1956, people were saying, oh, this is the end of radio, this is the end of radio. I think it's fair to say now, in 1995, radio in Australia has never, ever been stronger.
That's for sure, Ian, and certainly racing-wise, I think radio is here to stay with the coverage. As we said, it's portable, you can take it anywhere.
Yep.
You know, television can cover the racing, but you can't always be by a television set, but you can always have a radio with you.
Yeah, well said.
Okay, Ian, well, thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to catching up with you throughout the day and hearing your call of one of the races out there at the Qantas Canberra Cup today, being part of the Triple S team.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for the time, Paul.
Okay.